Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, early in 1940, the West Coast Pacific Fleet was transferred from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So from 1940 to December 41, we lived the life of Riley over there in Hawaii with our swimming and all our sports and everything, and taking pictures and listening to the beautiful music and the sunshine. We're in paradise, and everything was good until December the 6th. That was the day before Pearl Harbor. I had no watches that day, so I decided I'd wash clothes and hang them up to dry down on the third deck where it was nice and warm. So after I washed clothes and everything and went down there, and I thought, well, I'll write a letter home to my dad and mother and tell them how nice it is over here. So I got down there in the third deck and I was all by myself. So I'm sitting there thinking about all the times we used to have at home and everything, and all the good times, and what to tell my dad and mother in the letter. So I started writing the letter, and I sat there for a while. So now it's about 2 o'clock Sunday morning, and everybody's in bed sleeping except the guys that was on gun watch. So I decided I better get to bed and get some sleep. So now it was 2 o'clock Sunday morning, December the 7th. So I come up from the third deck and put the letter in the mailbox and got into my sack and went to sleep. Before I knew it, reveille was blowing and I was up for breakfast Sunday morning, December the 7th. So we all went in there and were having breakfast, and while we were eating breakfast, we got the word coming over the speakers that the USS Ward just sank a midget Japanese submarine trying to sneak in under the nets. So everybody got shook up, and all the officers were out there with their binoculars trying to see and look around. So anyway, it quietened down. They said, oh well, I don't know what the heck that little Japanese sub was doing in there trying to sneak in, you know. Anyway, they got rid of it. That's good. So then I finished eating my breakfast and I thought, well, I better get down on the third deck and gather up my laundry that I washed Saturday night, because it'll be nice and dry now. So as I'm running down to the third deck to get my laundry, I didn't realize that the Japanese planes were already flying in towards us. You know, they were already coming in on us, but they were too far out yet. Anyway, I get down to the third deck and I'm gathering up my laundry, and I heard this rumbling. And I thought, gee, what the heck is that? I couldn't understand why I could hear rumbling down there, because the third deck, there's no speaker system down there, and the overhead is 8 inches solid steel on the overhead, and you can't hear anything down there in the third deck. But I could hear this rumbling. And I thought, well, there must be dynamite in the hills again, because every once in a while on a Sunday they'd be out there dynamiting, rebuilding the roads and stuff. So I thought, that's what they're doing, you know. So I paid no attention. I just folded up my laundry, gathered it all up, and I started walking towards the stairway to go up to the next deck, second deck. As I walk over to the deck, to the ladder, I see these guys coming running down the ladder. You know, and they didn't say anything to me, and I just stepped out of the way to let them go down. I didn't realize they were running over to the ammunition hoist, to hoist the ammunition up. They didn't say anything to me. So after they run through, I started up the ladder with my laundry, and when I got to the second deck, I could hear the speaker system going then. Go to your stations, we're under attack, it's a real thing. And then I realized what all that rumbling was I heard, you know, that I thought was dynamite. Oh, we're under attack. So I just let my laundry drop. I don't know what happened to it. I just dropped it and it fell down. I ran up the ladder, up to my main deck, ran through the compartment, got my tin helmet, got it on my head, headed down towards the gun, our 3-inch gun that we were on. And as I'm running down there, I could see the Oklahoma starting to roll over, and all the flames and fire, and the guys trying to hang on to the ship on the side and or fall into the burning water of the oil. And I could see the bombs dropping on the Arizona. That wasn't the one that really put it out, but there were 5 or 6 bombs dropped on the Arizona before the big blast. So then I noticed Fort Island was in total flames. And by that time I looked over at the gun, and Ray Woods was there trying to get the gun cover off. We had our gun cover on our over our 3-inch gun. So I helped Ray get the canvas cover off. By that time, the rest of the guys were at the gun. So then now we had to get our ammunition. So we had 25 rounds of 3-inch in the clipping room, but it was locked up. So we all got up to the doorway there, you know, and how are we going to get this ammunition out of here? It's locked up. So our hot shellman, Johnson, he went over to the bulkhead. They had a big, about a 12-inch brass water nozzle hanging on the bulkhead. So he grabbed that water nozzle off the bulkhead, come over and he whacks that lock with that water nozzle, and the lock went flying. And I was thinking, gee, I hope that he gets the lock out, because if he damages the lock, you know, then if they bring the key around, we won't be able to get the lock open. But anyway, one blast and the lock was knocked off. So when he did that, part of the water nozzle came off and spun right by my ear. I almost took my eye out, going right by my ear. And I thought, boy, that was close. Anyway, we got the 25 rounds out and got the gun started and started firing at the planes over there. And by that time, the rest of the ammunition came up from down below decks where the guys were on the hoist. So we were getting all the ammunition up to our guns, so we kept firing and firing. We fired about 50 rounds of ammunition at the planes. And I noticed that the Fort Island was really in total flames now. The Oklahoma had finally turned all the way over, and the Arizona was going to take this big blast. When they dropped the big bomb in the Arizona, went down into the turret, into the magazines, and the whole ship blew up. And the 3-inch, the 14-inch turret gun on the top raised right off the ship. You could see right underneath it, and it crashed right back down to the ship and sank right down into the bottom of the ship. And I thought, man, that was the biggest explosion I ever seen. And I looked over and I seen the Shaw. They were missing the Shaw with 4 or 5 bombs, and then finally I thought, they're not going to hit it, they're not going to hit it. And finally they hit the Shaw with this bomb, and it blew up like just like a big explosion, you know. And they were in the next dry dock to us. So all parts of that ship that was blown off came landing down on our ship, all around us. And I thought, boy, they're going to run out of ammunition pretty soon. So then there was a little lull there where everything got quiet. So I thought, gee, they're gone. About 10, 15 minutes, here they are, come back again. And I was holding this shell ready to give to Weeby. I'm holding this 3-inch shell like that, and I looked up. I seen these planes coming over our bow, way up high, you know. And I hollered over to Ray. I said, Ray, there they are, they're back. But at the time I noticed them, they had already dropped their bombs, but I didn't know that. You know, I didn't see the bombs coming down. I just seen the planes out there. Anyway, Lieutenant Commander Craig was sent down from the bridge to loosen the mooring lines. So he went down there and he's loosening the mooring lines so that if the dry dock got hit and the water came in real fast, the ship wouldn't tip over. If he loosened the mooring lines, the ship could rise up instead of tipping over. So he loosened the mooring lines, loosened them over here. He come back and he goes real fast, walks in front of me. He steps inside this doorway right here, like the door. He stepped on one side of the doorway, come back over to me. He says, do you have to stand right here? And I said, yes, sir, this is my battle station. I have to stand here. And he says, well, when your gun is not firing, he says, why don't you step inside this doorway and get away from the machine gun bullets because they're flying all around you. And I told him, I said, sir, I can't do that. I said, this is my battle station and I have to stay here. And he said, the last thing I heard him say was, it don't sound right to me. So he took over and he put one foot, he stepped back inside that doorway again as those bombs came down, and the one 500-pound bomb hit our ship right just ahead of him in the compartment, and he was killed in there. And I thought, gee, you know, that was bad because he spent a minute talking to me, looking out for my safety, you know. And if he didn't stop and waste a minute talking to me, he would have been back up on the bridge with the captain and he would have been alive today, you know. but he got killed looking out for my safety. So anyway, the bombs that they dropped was one hit on the port side of the ship, one hit on the starboard side, one hit on the broadside on the side of the ship, and one hit outside the dry dock, and one hit us. There was 4 or 5 of them missed us just by a hair, but the one came down and right on there on our gun mount. So we were only 25 foot from that 500-pound bomb when it went off. So all the guys on the 5-inch gun up in the boat deck were killed. Most of the Marines on the marine gun and the 5-inch in the casemate were killed. And our gun, on the 3-inch gun on the main deck, was knocked out. So the bomb took out 3 guns and 3 decks with the one bomb. And most of the guys all around in there were killed or tore apart, you know. And the guys that survived it was Highland, me, and Kimber maybe got his foot shot off. And another Marine got saved out of there. But everybody else in there was killed. They're all splattered all over the place. But Highland and I were very fortunate to get out of that. But what it done to me is when the bomb went off, it blew me up in the air like a rag doll, you know, about 15 or 20 feet in the air. I'm up in the air, circled around to come down and landed on my elbow on the deck. And I was in this big ball of fire in the concussion. And the concussion, when I hit the deck, I landed on my elbow and it slid me down the deck, away from the gun. Like I was over here, it slid me down here about 25 feet or so, away from the gun. And I felt something hit me on the head, and I had this tin helmet on. Something bounced off my head, and it smashed my tin helmet into my head, caved it in, almost tore my head off. And the shrapnel hit my right leg, and the blood was flying out of my leg like a faucet. And I had 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree burns. I had shrapnel, I had concussion, and my back was all jacked out of shape. And my spleen was shoved up underneath my chest cage. But it didn't break. I just shoved it up in there, the concussion. And the guys from the band took me down below decks to the doctor. And the doctor had a whole line of the guys that was wounded lined up. And he took, the 2 guys from the band took me right to the doctor. And he was going to look at me right away. He seen my leg, you know, all full of blood. And I put my hand on his chest and I pushed him back. I said, "No, doctor," I said, "get these guys here. They're in worse shape than me, you know." I said, "I'm okay." And he's going to pull me ahead again. I pushed him back. I said, "No, get him. Get this guy." So the doctor looked at my eyes like this here. And he said, "Oh, okay." And he told the guy, the medic, he says, "Get him a chair." We were down there, we didn't have no lights, we had flashlights because our power was knocked out. It was dark down there. So they were working with flashlights. So he told the coroner, he said, "Get him a chair." So he got me a chair, and I sit down in the chair and get him a flashlight. So I'm holding the flashlight on there for the doctor while he's working on these guys. And I'm helping the doctor along. Next thing I know, I don't remember what happened. I came to, I was in a cot, and had me in a cot. And when I came to, and the doctor says, "Take them, get them off the ship down on the dock so they can take them to the hospital." So these 2 guys from the band, one on each side of me, got me off there, and I'm hopping on one leg, and one guy on each side of me, and they took me.
Can you tell me why you were hopping on one leg?
Yeah, this right leg here was jacked up on my back, and I couldn't get it down. It wouldn't come back down. It just stayed up there like this. So I couldn't get my leg down, you know. It would have done something to the muscle. It just jacked my leg up, and it wouldn't come down. So I'm hopping on one leg. So they were taking me down the gangway, and as they were taking me down the gangway, this jet plane came down real low, right across like this here, and there's a civilian with a pickup truck here, and we had 5 or 6 stretchers along, 1, 2 like this in a row, right here, and the truck was here, and I'm down in the gangway. And when the plane came in and strafed across, his bullets were through the truck and killed and shot across these guys in the stretchers. And as the bullets went across these stretchers, you'd see the guys going, jumping up and down like that, just like the keys on a piano, you know, as the bullets hit them. they were already wounded, and he killed them, which was, I didn't think was very nice. So anyway, the guy, the civilian with the truck goes like this here, and the guy that got me down to the truck, and he put me inside the truck. And I sat in the seat, and I looked out through the windshield. There's a hole right by my face in the windshield. And I looked up through the hole, and I said, "When did you get that?" He said, "Right now." He said, when they shot that bullets and killed these guys, that they shot right through the truck. And I said, "Boy, I'm glad I didn't sit in this truck a half a minute sooner. I'd had my head blown off." He said, "Yeah, let's get the heck out of here." So, so he takes off for the hospital, you know, and I'm sitting on the seat, and that's the last I remember. I don't remember getting to the hospital or going in or anything. When I came to, I was in the hospital. I was stretched out. And they had me all jacked up in my arms, and my legs were all burnt. And then skin was hanging off my arms like wet toilet paper, and I was blacker than coal. My hair was all burnt off. All the skin was hanging off my arms like wet toilet paper, you know, and off my legs. I looked like a scarecrow. Anyway, they got me in the sack there, and they started giving me morphine, and the nurse came around. She had a bowl of soup, chicken soup, with a straw in it. And my face was all swollen up, you know, and my mouth was like this here. And she had this rubber tube, and she says, "Open your mouth." I had my mouth open as far as I could open it, but my lips were still together, you know, because my face was swollen up so big. And she took this rubber tube and she forced it into my mouth, you know, and she says, "Suck on that, suck on that." And I did, and I could tell it was chicken soup, you know. So I drank that down. Then they come around and they gave me more morphine. And they put pins underneath my elbows to hold my arms up, and I lay on my back like that for 3 or 4 days. And finally, I passed out. And the next thing when I came to, I came to and I could see the doctor's face down here looking at me. And I opened my eyes and he says, "Oh," he says, "you're back with us." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You were gone for 5 days." I was in a coma, didn't know it. Anyway, they gave me morphine and they were working on my legs and stuff and trying to patch them up. Anyway, 2 weeks later, the nurse came around with a pencil and a paper wanting volunteers to go back to the States. They wanted to get the guys out of the hospital in case of another attack. They didn't have no room to put the guys because the hospital was full. And they had 400 or 500 stretchers out in the grass out in front of the hospital, outside. So they didn't have enough nurses or anything. So they wanted these guys to volunteer to go back to the States in case of another attack. So they said, "You got to volunteer because we don't know if you can make it or not." So
Excuse me, I'm
I
sorry.
said, "Yeah, I'll volunteer." So Highland, he volunteered too, you know, and a bunch of other guys volunteered. They put us on this army ship, UL Scott, and we started taking off to go to San Francisco. So we had 2 escorts. We had the USS Detroit and the USS Louisville as escorts to get us back to San Francisco from Hawaii. So on the way back, we got attacked by Jap subs. But the Detroit and the Louisville went out there and got rid of the subs and sank them, got rid of them, blew them out. And so we got rid of them, so we got into the harbor there, just in San Francisco. We found out we couldn't get into the harbor of San Francisco, so we had to sit out there for 4 days out in the bay trying to get into the hospital because the Jap subs were in the United States keeping us out. Couldn't get into the United States. So the Detroit and the Louisville had to go in there and get those subs out of that, blasted out of that harbor so we could get in the harbor to go to the hospital. So that took 4 days to do that. So when they got the harbor cleaned out, the UL Scott went into the harbor and docked, and the guys from the new boots from the boot camp there in California were brought over to carry our stretchers into the hospital. So they used the boots out of boot camp to carry us into the hospital on our stretchers. And they were pale. They were looking at us and thinking, I could just imagine what they're thinking. What are we getting into, you know? New boots out of boot camp. Send us all wounded guys from Pearl Harbor. So anyway, I get in there December the 25th, 41. That was Christmas Day. I get into the hospital. They were carried in the stretcher. Of course, they got me into the sack there, and they got me back on my back again. They looked at my legs, and The doctor looked at me. They had my legs wrapped around with Vaseline and this bandage around my legs when I left Pearl. But 4 days later, all the juice from that wounds went through the bandages and was trying to form a scab on the outside of the bandages. So when I get in there, the doctor pulled the blanket back and looked at my legs, and he said to the nurse, he says, look at that, look at that. He says, we got to cut them off. So what he had to do, he took a scissors and he cut down like this down through the whole thing and pull them off, rip them off, rip them off, cut them down with the scissors and rip them off. Boy, the blood was all over the place. And then they started putting the tannic acid on me, you know, on my face and everything, trying to get my face healed up, my arms healed up, my hands. So anyway, I stayed in there till I was able to get up and walk around. And they let me go home for my birthday, February 23rd. And they let me go home on the leave. And I got on the train and I didn't know what I was doing. I lost all coordination. I couldn't tell what I was doing. I tried to give them my orders. I couldn't set my orders down on the desk for the people, because every time I tried to do that, I was hitting down here. And they were looking at me, you know, what the heck's the matter with this guy? So finally, I thought, 3 or 4 times I couldn't get my orders on the table. So what I done, I raised them up like this here and brought them down. That's the only way I could get them on the table, by raising them up in the air, then bringing my arm down, because my coordination was completely gone. They let me go home too quick, you know. They wanted me to go home on leave, see my mom and dad. Anyway, when I got back to the hospital, then they were in there working on me and tannic acid and morphine. By March 29th, 1942, I was able to walk around pretty good, but my legs were still raw meat. So I'm walking around there, and Highland would come over, and him and I were talking, and I'm packing some of my stuff, and Highland says, what are you going to do, go back to duty? And I said, yeah, I think I'll be able to get back to my ship now. That was the 29th of March, 1942.
That's Herbert Highland.
Yeah. So as I'm trying to pack my stuff, I seen the 2 officers and a woman officer coming walking over towards my bunk. I didn't recognize them because I knew all the officers around the hospital. And I didn't know these. And I found out they're from Washington, D.C. They come in to take pictures of my legs to take back to Washington, to show Washington no more shorts in the Navy. We used to wear these short pants. And they realized with the short pants, when the bomb blasts you, all your legs are going to get burnt. So when they took these pictures to take back to Washington, so after they got through taking the pictures of my legs, they got me standing up, you know. One of the officers said, would you like one of these pictures? And I said, yeah, I'd like to have one. So they took another picture and gave it to me, so I had a picture and I still got it. So then he says, I said, well, I'll be getting back to duty. And they says, no, you can't go back to duty. And I said, what do you mean I can't go back to duty? He said, well, you're too badly injured to go back to duty. He says, you got to go home. And I said, well, I'm not going home. He says, what do you mean you're not? He said, why? I said, well, I got 2 reasons why I'm not going home. I says, number 1, I'm a single man, I'm not married. If I was married, I'd probably go home. I says, that's number 2 reason is that I lived with these guys for almost 2 years. And there's about 38 of us gunners in this one compartment. For almost 2 years I lived with these guys, you know, and they're like brothers. That's my family, you know. I've been away in the Navy for so long, and I didn't just get aboard that ship. I said, I lived with these guys. I said, if I just got aboard the ship and didn't know anybody, it wouldn't have mattered. I'd have went home because it didn't matter about these other guys. Didn't know them, you know. I said, I lived with these guys so long. I said, I'm not going home. He says, well, and then I said to him, I said, how would you like to do that? And he stepped back and he says, you know, he says, I wouldn't like to do that either. He said, well, what do you want to do? He said, how about shore duty in San Diego? And I started laughing. I said, that's worse than going home. I said, if I get duty in San Diego sitting on my butt, my buddies are out there fighting, and if they get killed, here I am sitting on my butt. I said, if I'm going to be sitting on my butt, I'd rather be sitting on my butt home than San Diego. And they started laughing. I started laughing too. I said, well, he said, oh, what do you want to do? And I said, you just send me back to my ship. So I said, okay. But they weren't even thinking about my legs at the time. You want to go back to your ship? Okay, go back. They sent me back too soon because my legs were raw meat yet. Anyway, they let me go back. So when I got back to the ship, back in the Pennsy again, I had to report to sick bay. I went to report to sick bay. The doctor in the ship looked at my legs. Holy mackerel! He said, "How come they sent you back here?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to come back." He said, "It's not." He said, "It's too soon." He said, "Your legs are raw meat." He says, "In 2 weeks we're heading for the Coral Sea, for a battle of the Coral Sea." He said, he said, "If you stay aboard with them legs and we get over in Coral Sea and we get hit again," he said, "and if the fire blast hits some legs again," he says, "we have to amputate your legs." He says, "We can't skin graft them." He says, "They weren't skin grafted now, and if you get them burned again, we won't be able to skin graft. We'll have to amputate your legs." He says, "You got to go back." I said, "Well, I'm not going back to the hospital." So he gets on the phone, and he calls the hospital from the ship. And he's raising Cain with the hospital. Blah, 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 blah. And I don't know what the hospital said. The hospital probably said, well, we're sending it. He wanted to go back, you know. Anyway, he hangs the phone up. He's mad. He said, "Well, I have to accept you," he said, "because they sent you here." He said, "But we're not leaving until 2 weeks." And he said, "I want you down to sick bay every morning so I can check your legs." He said, "And just before we head out to sea," he said, "if I don't like the looks of those legs, I'm going to send you back to the hospital." He says, "I can do that after I accept you." He said, "Then I can send you back again." Because I can't do it right now, he says, "because they sent you here and I got to accept you." So he says, "You report every morning." So every morning I go down there, you look at him, you know, ooh boy. Kept doing that every morning. Now we had 2 days left. The ship was ready to go to sea. 2 more days. So I was checked into the sick bay that morning. He didn't say nothing, he just looked at my legs and he shook his head and he said, "Do you really want to stay aboard ship?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Well," he said, "if you do what I ask," he said, "we'll keep you." I said, "What do you want me to do?" He says, "Every time when we leave here and go to sea, if they sound general quarters," he said, "let the guys run to the gun." He says, "and you run to your locker, pile your skivvy shirts up in the pile, and these little ropes keep them piled up in your locker." He said, "General quarters, they run to the gun, you run to your locker, get them skivvy shirts." And he said, "Then run to the gun, and while the guys are getting the gun ready to fire," he says, "you wrap these skivvy shirts around your legs and tie them onto these ropes. So that if we get hit again," he says, "the fire won't burn your legs." He said, "If you do that, we'll keep you." So I made him a promise. "Yeah, yes sir, I'll do that." So when we head out to sea, right away we had general quarters. So that's what I done. I get to the gun, I'd wrap my legs up and tie them onto these ropes. The guys used to say, "Here comes Mac with his skivvy shirts." They were teasing me, you know, but they knew I had to do it. You know how they tease each other. "Here comes Mac with his skivvy shirts." So I done that there. And then after the Coral Sea, the USS Pennsylvania went up. They wanted us to knock out Attu up in Alaska. Because the Japs took over the island of Attu. That's right near Russia there. That was the last little island before you went to Russia. And the waters is all charted from like Adak, Kodiak, Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, all along Dutch Harbor, all the Aleutian Islands, all the water there was charted. But Attu, way up here by Russia, this water was never charted, you know, because they never went up there. And they didn't know if and the fog was dense, and the weather was ferocious freezing, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face with fog. And Forrestal in Washington says, "See if you can get up there." He said, "If you can't make it, come on back. If you can't make it. But try and make it if you can." He said, "We're going to we're going to radio Tokyo and ask them if they'll take their soldiers and just get out of the island. We won't even fire on them. They can just get out and get out of there, go back to Japan. We won't touch them. Just get off the island. So we started off on the trip. They radioed Tokyo. If they'd get their soldiers off at 2, we wouldn't bother them, just let them get the heck out of there. Then we wouldn't have to invade it. Japs just laughed at us, you know. They weren't going to get off that island. They wouldn't listen to for oh, no way. So then we kept on going. Then now, about 2 days later, they called Tokyo again. Told them, we're almost up there now, we're halfway up. If you get out, we'll let you get out. We'll come back. Japan laughed at us again. You weren't going to get off. That was the last. So we went right up and to get up in there we had a wooden boat. A wooden boat that led us, and we took our battleships and destroyers.
Minesweeper?
Yeah, the Pennsy, the Nevada, and the Idaho with some destroyers, and we all got in a line behind this wooden ship, and the wooden ship was going up through there, and the wooden ship, if they hit a reef, the wooden ship would bounce off the reef and it wouldn't bother it. But if our iron ships hit the reef, it would cut it like a razor blade. But the wooden boats would just bounce off them. This wooden boat would bounce off the reefs. So we all got in line, and this wooden boat got us in there. So we got all our ships up in the bay there, Chicago Bay. Boy, we were happy about that. You know, we get in there. So then we had 3 days of firing up there. See, the first day was May the 11th. We opened fire on them, sight unseen. We couldn't see nothing, you know. It was all dense fog. But the Army was giving us place. They'd say, up higher, we raise our guns up higher, or to the left or right. And then when we got on target, because we were firing blind, you know, with all the fog. And the soldiers would say, you're right on, rapid fire. Then we'd go rapid fire, you know. And if we got off, they'd say, you gotta go to the right, or gotta go to the left. That's how we fired on the island, you know, the 3 battle wagons and these destroyers. And in 3 days, we knocked out everything on the island. And there was nothing left. They went in to check and see what kind of damage we did, you know, after 3 days of bombardment. And there was nothing left alive on the island except 2 dogs. That's all they could find on there. Everything else was killed. And we thought we had civilian people on there on that island, you know. And we thought that we killed our American people too. So we were really sad about that, you know. We didn't find out till I think it was about a year later, we found out that the only thing we killed in there was Japanese, because when the Japanese took the island over, they took all those Americans and put them in Japan. So the Japanese were on the island by themselves. There was no Americans on there because the Japs took them off and put them in Japan. But we didn't know that till about a year later. Then when we found out we didn't kill any of our own people, we were really happy about that, you know. But boy, we thought first that we killed everybody, you know. And then after that we got up north of the Aleutian Islands, up around Pribilof Islands, and we had an explosion up in the bow. And 500 gallons of aviation went up with this bomb that went off, and it took out 500 gallons of our aviation gas along with it. So about 60, I was on the back end of the fantail on the 20mm machine gun on the fantail, and when the bomb went off in the bow, the whole ship went back and forth like this, like a fan. And the smoke was rolling off on both sides of us like this. And the ship started sinking, and we had the watertight doors closed, you know. She went down about 60 foot of the bow, the Pennsy went underwater. And the first 3 turret guns, the 14-inch guns, the first ones that was out here, they went underwater. That's how far the water came up. So we pulled in the ADAC, and the ADAC says, the damage is too bad, we can't take care of it, you gotta go back to Seattle. So we went back to Seattle, going about 2 or 3 knots, you know, the bow underwater and a big stream of oil behind us. we went back to Seattle, and we pulled into the yards there, and we checked the list of guys being transferred now. They had put the list up for transfer, because every time the ship would hit the United States, they'd take a bunch of the old guys off for transfer. So every time we hit the States, there's a transfer list. So we hit the States there in Seattle, up was the transfer list. So we all over there were checking it. My name was on it. I was going to be one of the old timers transferred off. So anyway, we all lined up there then to get transferred off. And the yard workers came aboard to check that damage that was done up in the bow. We had the watertight doors are still closed, you know.
That damage in the bow, that bomb, what bomb was that?
The USS Pennsylvania.
I understand, but what type of bomb was it that went off?
Well, we don't know. We don't know what it was. All we know is an explosion up in the bow. That's all we knew. But we found out later it was sabotage. We found out later. Anyway, I was lined up now to leave the ship, so this guy's getting ready to leave the ship to get transferred off to the receiving station. And these yard workers came aboard to check the damage. And when they opened that door, the air got in, oxygen from the air got into the compartment, and it blew up again. I remember standing on the deck getting away to leave the ship, and boom, it blew up again. Killed some of the workers and a couple of sailors who got killed. It exploded again by the concussion, you know, the compression. When the fresh air, when they opened the door and the fresh air went in there, it exploded again. You know. Anyway, I got transferred off. I got into the receiving station, and I got transferred onto a small destroyer, USS Thompson, a little teeny destroyer.
Do you remember the number?
Yeah, 627, DD 627, USS Thompson. That's what I got on from the receiving station. We left there, went through Panama Canal, on up through the West Indies, pulled into Boston, Massachusetts, tied up in Boston. About 4 days later, we're aboard ship there, and I went over to get a drink out of the fountain, and my back injuries on my spine from Pearl Harbor gave way. When I twisted around like that to get a drink from the fountain, my back went out. I'm laying on the deck. So the guys went and got the doctor, and Dr. Moore gave me a shot in the arm, got me back on my feet. But they had to hold me under my arms to get breath. If they put their arms under here, hands under my shoulders and raised up on me, I could breathe. If they let go, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't get no air. It was just close my lungs up. So they put their hands underneath here, raised me up, and laid me down on the stretcher. When they laid me down on the stretcher, then I could breathe on my back. I could breathe. So they took me up the ladder. There's a small ladder about that wide, up with a stretcher, and they got the stretcher cockeyed in there trying to get me up. And it took them so long to get that stretcher with me in it up that ladder that I almost died because I couldn't get no air. Well, as soon as they raised the stretcher up like that, I couldn't breathe. As long as it was flat, I could breathe. When they raised the stretcher up, I couldn't breathe. By the time they got me to the top of the landing, I was purple, almost dead. And when they got me up the top and leveled me off again, I started breathing again. Anyway, they got me in the hospital in Boston. That was about 4 days after we got there. And I'm in the hospital in Boston now, and they're working on back, giving me diathermy and x-ray and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, about a week later, I was still in the hospital in Boston. Our ship was tied up out there yet. And my buddy Jones came over to the hospital to see how I was doing. My buddy Jones. So he came into the hospital, he said, hey Mac, how you doing? I said, I'm pretty good, I'm able to walk around now. I said, as long as I don't bend over, I'm all right, you know. Because if I bent my head down and bent my back, I'd be on the deck again, and I knew that. So I kept my head up, and if I bend over, I'd bend over by the waist. I wouldn't bend over like this. Oh! That would do. And I said, I'm doing pretty good. He said, well, Mac, he says, I'll tell you. He says, if you don't get out of this hospital in Boston, he says, you're going to miss the invasion of Europe. He says, because we're going to Trinidad. He says, in 2 days we're heading for Trinidad. And from Trinidad, we're going to Ireland and England and getting ready for the invasion of France. Or not France, it's the invasion of Germany, you know. We didn't know we were going to invade someplace, you know. We knew we were going to invade. He said, if you don't get out of this hospital, he says, you're going to miss the invasion of Europe. He says, you're going to be left in the States. And I said, Jones, I'll be out tomorrow. He says, what do you mean you'll be out tomorrow? I said, you watch, I'll be aboard ship tomorrow. Okay, so he left me and went back to the ship, you know. So now I'm already, went to bed that night, you know. In the morning you stand by your bunk, you know, all the guys stand by their bunks. The doctor goes through and checks all the guys, you know, see how they're doing. So I'm ready for him. I'm standing there like it's here, ready for the doctor. He checks this guy, he comes up to me, he says, how you feeling? I said, doctor, I'm in tip-top shape. I'm ready to go back to the ship. He said, well, you are? He said, let's see you bend over. Boy, I fooled him. I said, sir, I can bend over easy. Let's see you bend over. So I put my head up like this here, and I bend over by the waist like this. I went like that about 4 or 5 times. Oh, boy, he says, you're doing real good. Let him go back to his ship. I'm back to my ship now. Next day, Jones, I'm back to work. He said, hey, how'd you get out of the hospital? I says, I lied to the doctor. I fooled him. Here I am. Go, boys. So I said, boy, but I got to be careful. You know, I can't lift anything. And then, see, our ship's doctor knew that, you know. And he knew that I lied my way out of the hospital. So he's watching me like a hawk. Don't lift, don't bend over. So I didn't have to do anything anyway. I didn't have to stand in the watches or anything because I was an RT. I didn't have no watches, no nothing. All I had to do was just walk around.
Can you tell me how you got into RT, or is that later?
You know, I get on, as soon as I get on that ship, I made RT. I was only on there half an hour. I wasn't even checked into the ship yet when I made an RT. I missed that part, didn't I?
Yep, can you explain how? It's a good time.
Anyway, then we went to Trinidad. Then from Trinidad we went over to England. From England we went to Ireland. And we practiced over there getting ready for the invasion. So on June 6th, we went over and invaded Normandy there, Omaha Beach at Normandy. And we used our 4 little destroyers as an artillery for the Army. Because the Army wasn't supposed to hit the beach until the tanks got in. They had 12 Army tanks. They were on rubber life rafts.
You've seen those, I've seen those.
And those 12 tanks were supposed to be floated into the beach and hit the beach before the soldiers did, so they'd have coverage. So these tanks all sank. They launched them too far back. They should have waited till they got closer to the beach. But the water was so bad and rough there, they launched them too far back. And they couldn't get to the beach, they all sank. And they're all still down in the bottom of the channeling out there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 of them. They're all, if you dive down there, you can see them all lined up yet, like that, down in the bottom of the harbor. So when the soldiers hit the beach, they had no coverage. So they used our 4 little destroyers as an artillery for the Army. So we blasted everything along the front there, so the soldiers would be able to get in. But in about 20 minutes or half an hour, we had about 6,000 guys were killed there. You've never seen such a mess in your life. They couldn't get on the beach, you know, they were getting killed faster than they could hit the beach. And it took us quite a while. It took us almost over a week before they could get the soldiers in there, you know, because they were pinned right down. And then there's a high cliff there, you know, and we were getting places to fire at from the Rangers. The Rangers would climb up there and tell us where to fire, you know. Fire over here, fire over there. And we were blasting everything we could blast along the beach, you know. And then after that, they're down about 200 or 300 yards down the beach from Normandy here, from Omaha Beach, there was an 11-inch gun in here that was firing. The planes were going over trying to get this gun out and they couldn't get it. This gun would come out in these railroad tracks and fire and go back in. Come out, fire, go back in. Planes would go over, they couldn't get it. So they wanted to know if the Thompson would go over there and see if they could get it. That was our little ship. So, yeah, we'll go try. So we left the gang here and we took off and went over about 200 or 300 yards down where this gun was. So we got along the beach there and we started firing at the gun. Back and forth, back and forth. Couldn't get it. Man, the Captain Geberlin was getting teed off, you know. Son of a gun, we can't get that gun. He said, let's try something different. And he wasn't supposed to do this, but he did it anyway. He turned the ship around and he ran it up on the beach, like this here. And he said, okay, let's fire again. So we started firing again, still couldn't get it. So the captain now in Geberlin, he was getting teed off. He said, hold fire, hold fire. He says, let's try something different. He said, let's fire at the cliff. Don't fire at the gun. Fire at the cliff and see what happens. That cliff was hollowed out, you know, so that gun could get in. So we fired a couple of rounds at the cliff and the whole thing just collapsed. It collapsed down and covered the gun up. The gun couldn't come out anymore because when we collapsed that cliff, it came down and covered the gun up. Boy, Captain Geberlin was so happy. He started jumping up and down the deck and took his hat off, throws it down, he's jumping down. He says, Powder River, let her buck. Powder River, let her buck. Oh boy, boy. He was so happy. So he radios back here now to where the battleship was by Normandy here, you know, we're still back here yet on the beach. And he radios back to the boss ship, we got the gun, we got the gun. Oh boy, the Baldwin says, okay, come on out and come on back. Come on back about 38 knots, that's what we could do. Roger. So now we tried to back off the beach, found out the ship wouldn't come off the beach, you know. We couldn't get it off. Oh boy, Captain Geberlin says, I know what to do. He said, well, get the ship rocking. He said, full speed ahead, full speed reverse. Full speed ahead, full speed reverse. Like that, back and forth. And we got the ship going like this now, you know, on the beach, bouncing up and down. When we got the ship bouncing up and down, I said, okay, full speed reverse. Full speed reverse, and we got off. Well, we got off the beach, but we found out that the bow of the ship was going down now. We tore a big hole in the front of the ship. When we hit the beach, you know, tore a hole in the bow. And the water was filling the forward compartment, but the watertight doors are shut, same as the Pennsy, you know. So the water filled the bow, and the ship went down a little bit, like this, not much, just a little bit. Because that was a small ship and the compartment was small, you know. So it didn't take that much water, so we went down a little bit.
Do you remember how long she was roughly?
How
long was the ship roughly?
The ship, I think, was about, I think it was a little over 100 foot long, but it was only about 30 foot wide.
Oh, a little one, right?
Yeah, it was real narrow. It was a small destroyer. So anyway, once we got it off the beach, we tried to get the ship turned around now. When we tried to get the ship turned around, we're supposed to come back at 38 knots. Well, as soon as we got off the beach, we found out the ship was only going about 2 knots because we bent the shaft. When we were up on the dock, on the beach like that, we bent the shaft and the screw was bent. So when the shaft was going round, it was going like this here. And that made the ship go. The ship was wobbling back and forth, and we were going about 2 knots. And our boss ship was watching us in the binoculars like this here. We're down here, see, and they were over here. They were looking at us with the binoculars, and the Baldwin says, what's your problem, what's your problem? Captain Geberlin says, well, I guess our shaft is bent. He says, we can't get going. We're just barely moving in the water. And the boss ship said, well, don't come near us then. He wanted us to get out of there and come back at 38 knots. But he said, if you're going to come back here going 2 knots, you know, he said, they're going to be shooting at you, and all those shells that they're shooting at you are going to come over and get us. You know? He says, don't come near us. He says, head up in the channel about a mile, straight out in the channel. Instead of coming back over here, he says, go on out in the channel. So that's what we did there. We limped like this out in the channel about a mile out. We could still hear all the bombing and stuff going along. Normandy there, you know, we're out here about a mile. We could still hear all the guns going off. So they said, cut your engines. So we got about a mile out there in the channel and cut the engines dead in the water. We're sitting there, dead in the water. All I could hear is the bombs and stuff going off. And I remember one of the officers, I was up in the CIC room, and this officer was saying, I wonder what they want us to sit dead in the water here for. Ship's just sitting dead in the water. We sat there about 15 minutes, nothing. All at once we heard the loudspeaker come on. Head for Wales, they're waiting for you. That's all they said. Head for Wales, they're waiting for you. That's all they said. Roger. Start up the engines. Pulled into Wales. They put us in dry dock. Put a platform out there. This had two clamps, clamped this sheet metal. Two clamps grabbed that sheet metal, run it over there, push it up against the hole in the ship. This catwalk over here, one welder here, standing on this wooden platform. One welder here. They welded that patch on, nothing flat.
How big was that hole about?
The hole's about that big round,
Mm-hmm.
but they had a patch about this big on it. Patch, and they welded it on, right on the hole. And at the same time they're doing that, they were pulling the whole shaft out. They didn't even take the prop off. They left the prop right on the shaft, and they pulled the whole thing right out like that. And they put a whole brand new one right in. Just like that. Next morning, we're back over at Normandy fighting. The ship that took our spot for that night was only shot in half. It was only half a ship floating in the water.
Do you remember the name of the ship?
Yeah, it was the Hobson or the Dobson, one or the other. Hobson, I think it was the Hobson. When we got back to there the next morning to take our place, they were floating in the water, half a ship. I said, boy, oh boy, good job we weren't there. We'd have been blown apart. So anyway, we took our spot back again. We continued firing in there. And after about a couple of weeks, we had the soldiers pretty well in there. So they sent our 4 little destroyers down to southern France now. We're down here at Normandy, and then we'd come down here and we'd come around here. Down at Marseille, we came into France down here in southern France. And they wanted us to go in that harbor and knock out those German E-boats. They said they had 8 German E-boats in there. They were like our PT boats, you know. And we pulled into the harbor. On the way in, there was a German sub there in the harbor, and it was in shallow water. So we picked him up. We dropped depth charges and we sank the sub. He couldn't get away because he was in shallow water. So we knocked that sub out. Then we continued on in. And it was still daylight yet. When we get into the harbor, it was quiet. There's nothing. Nothing. So our 4 little destroyers are sitting there. It's still daylight yet. Couldn't hear nothing. What are we doing sitting here? Well, as soon as it got dark, we found out. The E-boats didn't want to come out till it got dark. They thought we were the old destroyers, you know, with the red band ammunition. And then they didn't know we had radar, sonar, star shells, and the high velocity ammunition. Because we were brand new destroyers. And the captain of the E-boats thought we were the old destroyers, you see. And he was going to blow us out of the water. Couldn't wait for us to get there. So as soon as it got dark and they brought the E-boats out, well, we just fired our star shells in there. We lit the bay up like Christmas. And we could see them all out there. So now we just run our guns on the E-boats, and our guns are radar controlled. And no matter where the E-boats went, the gun followed them, because it was on radar. So we fired at the E-boats, and in 4 nights we knocked out 7 of them. And the 8th one ran up on the beach to get away. So we sank 7 of them in 4 nights, the 4 little destroyers. We sank the E-boats. And then they fished the captain of the E-boats out of the water next morning. And Frankfurt picked him up out of the water, and he got him aboard ship, and he spoke English. He's the captain of the E-boats, German, but he spoke English. And the first thing he said when they brought him aboard ship was, "Congratulations." He says, "You done to me what I was going to do to you." He said, "I knew you guys were coming up here, and I couldn't wait for you to get here." He said, "I was going to blow you guys out of the water, but you done to me what I was going to do to you." So anyway, that was the end of that. So then we had come out of there. Then we come back to the Omaha area, you know. Then after that, we came back to States. That was in early '45 then, you know. Germany was surrendering. And we came back to States. And a come back to the States. We hit a storm, and the ship was bouncing around so much, I almost got drowned on it, and I almost got washed overboard and pulled my back apart again. So by the time we got back to the States, we pulled into Casco Bay, Portland, Maine, and I was back in the stretcher. Back in the stretcher again and off to the hospital in Casco Bay. Because the storm tore up my back again. Anyway, in the hospital at Casco Bay, now my ship was sitting out in the bay there, Casco Bay. And the doctors didn't know what to do with me. He says, we're going to operate on your back, he said, and explore. And I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, we're going to cut your back open and see what we can find. I said, doctor, I said, you got 2 Marines laying in the bed there. I said, you experimented on them, and they're both paralyzed. And I said, now you want to cut me open and do the same thing? I said, what's my chances of being paralyzed like these 2 Marines? He said, 50-50 chance. I said, sir, you're not operating on me. He said, what do you mean I'm not operating on you? What are you going to do? I said, you should just send me back to my ship. He said, you want to go back to your ship? Go. So I got out of the hospital there and headed back to my ship now. You know, my back was still in bad shape. Anyway, I'm heading back to the ship. So when I got in the yard there to get aboard ship, I walked up the ship and I looked up who had the gangway watch but the ship's doctor. Now the ship's doctor never stood gangway watches. When I seen the ship's doctor on the gangway, I knew something was up. I guess the hospital called up the ship and says, the guys, I'm coming back to the ship. So they put the doctor on the gangway watch to make sure I didn't get aboard ship. I didn't know that. So I walked up to the gangway and I salute the colors, salute the OD, permission to come aboard ship, sir. He says, permission not granted. I says, sir,